Hi there, my name's Dr. Frank, and I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about the Great Lakes. Now, the Great Lakes are a series of water bodies between Canada and the United States, and together they make up some of the largest freshwater in the world. And as you can see from this map, the Great Lakes touch on 8 different United States of the United States and 2 different provinces of Canada. They start out in Lake Superior, and then the waters empty into Lake Michigan and Lake Huron, making their way to Lake Erie, Lake Ontario, down the St. Lawrence River past Montreal, and eventually into the Atlantic Ocean. Now, did you know that because the water is shared between Canada and the US, there are lots of treaties that govern how water is shared between the 2 countries. Luckily, the 2 countries get along pretty well, so it's never been too much of a problem. Also, about 10,000 years ago, the Great Lakes were covered by a big sheet of ice, really thick, maybe a kilometer thick. Now, a kilometer, that's a lot of ice. In fact, if you look at any building or that you know of, a kilometer is probably twice as high as even the tallest building you've ever seen. So that's a lot of ice. But also, that's a lot of weight on the land. And when this ice melted, well, the land actually rebounds. Think of it kind of like a sponge. When you squeeze a sponge and it bounces back like that, well, the same thing's happening on the land. So as you can see from this diagram, where there's red, that's where the land is rising, and where it's blue, that's where the land is lowering. Now, this isn't very fast, maybe 1 centimeter every 10 years, but eventually that does start to add up. In fact, it's thought that maybe one day the land's going to rise so much that the water of the Great Lakes are no longer going to go into the Atlantic Ocean and might actually go down the Mississippi. One of the features of the Great Lakes is something you may have heard of. It's called Niagara Falls. Now, this spectacular falls is actually the water that's running between Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. And there's a lot of water going over the falls. In fact, you know your bathtub at home? Well, you could probably fill about 3,000 of those bathtubs every second with the water that goes over the falls. Lots of people from around the world visit it every year. But did you know that during the nighttime, when people aren't watching it, the floor of the falls is cut in half so that both countries can fill some really big reservoirs. And I mean really big. You or your friends might have a pool in the backyard. Well, these reservoirs could fill those pools about 1,000 times. The 2 countries then use this water in the reservoir to create power the next day when people go to work and they go to school. Speaking of how we use the water, well, we use the water for fun. People go swimming in it, they ride canoes, they go water skiing in it. It's also used for transportation. A lot of goods are gone back and forth using the waters of the Great Lakes. Also, it's used for drinking water, so anytime we can get a big glass of water. But also I said we use it for power. So this is a picture of the power plant. That's on the Canadian side of the Niagara River. And this really big power plant creates a lot of power. In fact, about a quarter of the power that we use here in Ontario, where I'm sitting, comes from the waters of the Great Lakes. So it's really important that we have the Great Lakes for that. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this little tour of the Great Lakes, and maybe one day you can come and visit. It's been Dr. Frank, signing off.